You're a SaaS founder, you've built something solid, but growth still feels harder than it should. Most SaaS companies don't fail because of bad tech. They fail because they've never become a must-have to the right customer. This podcast is here to change that. I'm Ton Dobbe, and this is the Remarkable SaaS Podcast. Every week I talk to founders in the trenches, facing friction, making bold moves, and building companies that last. We dig into real choices around focus, positioning, customer pool, team alignment, the things that separate forgettable software from the ones that people can't live without. No hype, no hacks. Just honest conversations to help you build something that people would miss if it was gone. If your SaaS should be indispensable but isn't yet, this is your podcast. Let's get into it. The guest on my podcast this week is Alex Levin, co-founder and CEO at Regal AI.
Don't solve problems with people, like solve the problem and then hire people if you want to. That's a very big shift in how companies are run.
This is Alex. We dig into how he grew Regal 4x in revenue since he was last on my podcast 2.5 years ago. This all while keeping his team exactly the same size. You'll hear why refusing an entire customer segment was the move that changed everything, and what happens when your average contract triples. The conversation reveals what most founders only figure out too late. Stop solving problems with people. This is a conversation about choosing leverage over headcount and what a company looks like when it refuses to mistake team size for progress. Well, hi, Alex. Thank you for making the time available again to be on the podcast.
Yeah. Thank you for having me again.
Yeah. I was looking forward to this. It's been 3.5 years I've been calculating, October 22. And when someone reached out to me about where the company is today, I was like, this is a good story to zoom into. I think I'm going to make this a repeating thing on the podcast, doing sort of a recast. So
where is everyone now?
Exactly, yeah. Well, that's cool. I mean, the show has been going on for about 8 years now. So, and this is actually episode 401. So,
wow.
Yeah, good. All right. We don't have to go talk about what you. Well, maybe if there's a recap for people that haven't listened to the first edition. Give me a short recap of what Regal is all about.
Yeah. So you can start before that. So my co-founder and I, our background is we helped build what's now the largest home services company in the world called Angie. And as part of that, I ran the contact center and the growth team, and she ran the product and the data team. And one of the things that we saw out of that is a lot of the things we were being told to do for the contact center for CX were just wrong. So, we did what we were quote unquote supposed to do. We added self-serve, we added all the digital channels. So, chat, email, SMS. And then we started deprioritizing voice to allow people to do the channels they wanted. And customers revolted. They were pissed. They did not like that. And so we ultimately thought of starting Regal based off of a few sort of learnings from there. So one was voice is not going away. It's far from dead. It's what customers prefer. Two, a lot of the problem is that we're not able to have the right conversation with the right customer at the right time. So we don't have the right data. The human agent is not able to have the context, and then the conversation goes badly and the customer is pissed off because they go, I told you this already. How come you don't know this? So data is a real problem. Three, instead of cowering and waiting and hoping the customer doesn't contact us, like when we see something is going wrong, it'd be better to proactively engage the customer. So that's where Regal came from. To what we talked about a long time ago, when we started, a lot of what we were trying to do is sort of keep people using voice by using automation and personalization of some of these tools to bring down the cost and improve the quality of those experiences. But the challenge was that, you still had to use human beings to do the voice, when we got started. About just after when we talked is when we started really being able to use more automation, use AI agents to do voice. And so today, the main part of our business is actually encouraging customers to use the AI agents built in Regal in tandem with their human agents. And what it allows them to do is realize that vision we had originally of always providing voice, providing it in a more personalized, contextual way, and doing it more proactively instead of just sitting there and waiting until a customer contacts you. So today we have almost 200 customers And like we were just talking about, we've, since we spoke last time, maybe 4x or more in revenue, and our headcount has stayed the same. So it's very interesting to see also internally as a company how we've been able to continue to be very efficient.
Okay, perfect summary. And you already highlighted some very important points. One being, of course, the thing that you just said in your last sentence, that since we talked, you didn't add more people, but you 4x the company. Is that mainly through automation? I guess so. Or has it got to do with other things as well? Has it maybe got to do with pricing? Has it got to do with the way you position? Talk me through the
Yeah.
most important angles there.
So I'd say it has to do with three things. So one, perhaps like ego, or that's an interesting thing to explore. Two, I think it has to do with the quality of our product and how much we're able to let people use it themselves without needing any of our support. And three, there is a new sort of tooling and automation using AI internally. So to the ego point, I think as a founder, you often, get caught up with, how big is your company? How many people do you have? And the more people you have, the bigger a company you are. And so I think early, we were quite successful from the get-go. We raised quite a lot of money and there was an opportunity to go solve problems by hiring people. And, you're sort of partly your ego tells you it's the right thing to do, and partly, you're being pushed to go faster. And if you can't improve the real solution to the problem, you hire somebody to solve the problem. And so perhaps we were too big too early is one concept that I'm
Yeah.
leading to. Had we had less ego about it and been more patient about it, we could have moved more slowly. We wouldn't have grown as quickly and solved problems in a different way instead of hiring people. So that's one concept.
Yeah.
I say two, at the very beginning when we made a product, there were all kinds of bugs and issues, and there were things that didn't work. There were things where we had a dream that the product did X and it didn't do it yet, so we hired a person to do that thing. And so again, instead of waiting until we could actually solve the problem, we hired a person to solve it. I think, it's a dangerous cycle to get into, because let's just say, take an extreme that you get, I don't know, 4 requests per customer per day to do something that is not productized yet. So you hire a person to do that. And one person can do those 4 requests. Now you get a second customer. Do you hire another person? Third customer, do you hire another? Like all of a sudden you hired quite a few people. What seemed like an okay solution when it was one, now you have a real problem when it's 4 or 5 that are managing that thing, and you really need to automate it. So I think, I admire a lot, or I've always admired companies that are able to find those opportunities to wait, not accept the revenue, solve it in the right way before hiring a person.
Let me make a small interruption here. Alex just made a remark that sets his approach apart from how most founders think about building teams. He realized he'd been solving problems with people, not because it was the right answer, but because it was the fast one. And the faster you grow, the faster that instinct becomes the thing that holds you back. So he stopped. He chose to fix the problem instead of hiding around it. And most founders never stop to question that. They just keep hiring. This is what remarkable software companies do. They acknowledge they cannot please everyone. Then they focus on the essence. And then they aim to be different, not just better. Want to master these traits as well? Simply read my book. I've made the electronic version available for free. Just visit theremarkableeffect.com to grab your copy, and inspiration will spark within 10 minutes. Back to the interview.
So that's one of the shifts, I think, as we've grown, is the quality of the product has gotten much better. We don't have as many of those situations where there are bugs or where there's a feature that we need humans to do. And so we can run many more customers, without having as much staff. As part of that also, as the product got better, we moved up market. So instead of the average revenue per customer, I don't know exactly what it was three years ago, is it was 50K a customer. Now we're over 150K a customer average revenue. So we've moved to larger customers where we don't have to be supporting them as much to get more revenue. And so that's also helped us increase the revenue per customer, so the revenue per employee. And then, the last part to what we talked about, there has been a shift in the tooling internally. So the marketing team uses, LLMs to generate content. The engineering team uses LLMs to code. Internally, we have people using LLMs to make applications for themselves and for us as a company instead of having to buy software. People are automating a lot of their workflow, and that's changing the way that we work. I mean,
Yeah.
in my personal workflow, honestly, the majority is around writing and sometimes around like having a thought partner. If I want to bat ideas back and forth, I'll even use ChatGPT. And we're starting to use some of the tool, or I'm starting to use some of the tools, I should say, and I think some other people are also, where I'm able to have the LLM actually take actions for me in different parts of my workflow. So take transcripts and do something, or take emails and do something. I'm a little nervous for my work of that because a lot of what I do is sort of higher touch and has more thought involved. But certainly for the things that are lower touch or more automated, like I'm perfectly fine with
Yeah.
that being the case. But yeah, so
Yeah.
altogether, I think now we're in a much better position where, we'll be cash flow, break even by the end of the year. We don't burn much money now. The people that are here have been able to learn much more, take on much more responsibility. We're able to pay people more money. I think the outcome will be better because we can make sure that there are fewer equity holders, right? So ultimately, they could make more money at the end of all this.
Yeah.
So I think, largely it's a positive. The negative,
Let me pause that, by the way, because I mean, there's so much going on here.
yeah,
I want to zoom into a couple of things, but let's park the negative part. The first thing I want to zoom into a little bit is the part where you said, okay, it was buggy. And of course, an early product is always, it has glitches. But at some point, there's possibly also that the product doesn't do what it's supposed to do, what the expectation is from a customer, which you actually couldn't call it a bug. It's just missing functionality. How do you decide at some point where to prioritize? Is it
yeah,
always,
very
first of
hard.
all, getting the bugs out, or is it also like, hey, wait a minute, we should now prioritize in this particular area because it gives us more leverage?
Yeah. So one of the principles at the beginning that we believed in was not spending a year just building a product. We wanted to actually make sure that something was in customers' hands and we were getting feedback. And one of the ways of
Yeah.
doing that is focusing on the front end, even if all of the back end doesn't do everything you'd expect yet, and putting it in customers' hands, seeing how they use it. I think the challenge was we were right. What I mean by that is the thing we put in customers' hands they wanted. And then all of a sudden there was a lot of stuff we'd have to do manually because not all of those features existed, or some of the features were buggy. So one thing we could have done is said, okay, we're right, pause, we're going to go build all this, and then we'll be back in 6 months. Instead, we just said, okay, great, use it. And then we had to hire people where there were bugs or where there were features
Yeah, yeah,
missing.
yeah.
Was that the right or wrong decision? I don't know. Like, I think these days, like, I would encourage people to for sure go through that process of getting stuff in people's hands. And I think using coding assistants and LMs, you can build the features they want faster. And so I don't think there's as much lag, but I do think it's important. What I wish in certain situations I'd had the gumption to do is to say, okay, I understand you want the thing. We're gonna pause for a month and go do it correctly and come back to you. Not just say, okay, go ahead and do it. That's
Yeah.
hard as a
So in
founder.
hindsight, you would have done something different.
In those days, I don't know because there weren't LLMs. It wouldn't have been a month. It would have been 6 months, So I think these days for sure, I would just pause,
Yeah.
do the work in a month and give it to the customers. In those days, it was harder. Um, but I think in general, you know, I think getting to a place where you find the right balance for your business of showing people something early that may not be fully functional and setting expectations as to what will happen if they use it, and then being able to quickly build to the vision that you set, so that customers are not disappointed. Like that's an important
Hmm.
skill to have as a
True.
B2B company.
Yeah, exactly. Now the other thing then, because I can understand indeed how, yeah, that it trickles up that you actually start hiring more people and more people and more
Yeah.
people. Actually, I wrote about it this morning because I've seen it in a different way at Unit 4 when we acquired companies left and right, and all of these companies we acquired but never merged. So they all keep doing their own thing. And at the end, you end up in 15 different places building the same thing. So that's maybe a different point, but it's about resourcefulness at the end. Um, the point about that you move to larger customers, has that been a big learning in the last 3.5 years, have you changed the segmentation almost? That you now
Yeah.
that you were initially charging 50K on average, and now you were able to charge a completely larger amount?
Yeah, so we basically shifted the go-to-market from a place where we were ripping and replacing the current contact center software into one where we were going greenfield and offering them AI agents, which could sit alongside the current contact center software. And that allowed us to go after larger customers because we didn't have to have a long sales cycle ripping out their CCaaS. So that's a
Mm.
big shift. We also, as part of that, intentionally said we're not going to accept the smaller customers. So many of the smaller size customers still want the product that we sell, but it would take, more resources to go and make sure we're building the right product for them. So we chose not to do it. Many companies, as you get bigger, have multiple segments. They have mid-market segment, an enterprise segment, a
Yeah.
strategic segment, and they support it with different resources. We decided not to go and spread ourselves like that and to focus on one segment.
Okay. And what is it segment?
So I call it upper mid market. Basically for us, we really focus on companies with contact centers from call it 100 to 1,000 agents, maybe. That's a
Uh-huh.
very good segment for us.
Is it also in a particular area of the market, maybe heavily regulated, or companies with complex products? I mean, do you see a sweet spot?
Yeah, so we focus, as we've talked about, on voice. And so we find it's easier to focus on companies who already have voice. That tends to be in more regulated or more complex industries because they think that voice is needed, trust is needed. It's not like in retail where they think voice is not needed. They'll wrong in retail, by the way. Eventually, voice will come back in retail as well. But so we focus on, insurance, healthcare, education, lending, industries like that. And in those industries, often we're going in where, they're worried that the data is many different places. They have multiple CRMs, they have different CCaaS systems, they have different, you know, uh, business units, and they're worried that that's going to make it hard for them to successfully roll out AI agents. And we specifically built our product for those challenges so that we can make sure they will be successful.
Yeah, exactly. It's a totally different way of thinking about, yeah, the market. Well, what your business is really all about and what it needs to do, right?
Yeah.
Um, you talked about break even 26, so this year that's coming, and you also said we've raised a number of rounds. I mean, from my notes, there was a seed round in 2020, then there was around a Series A in 22, which is around where the time where we actually talked, and then later on a seed.
21. I think there was a seed in 2020, Series A in 21.
Okay,
Yeah, so yeah, and then we've raised more. So now we've raised, I think, $83 million
yeah,
total
that's
at this
also what I
point.
calculated.
We have most of that still in the bank. It's just, I'd say the strategy that we're pursuing is not growth at all costs. We're not going out and saying, let's go and burn $20 million a month and who cares? There are people in our market who are doing that, and all power to them. They think that that's the right strategy. But for us, we find that we can acquire the right customers and grow them and do it in a way where as a business we're growing, 50 to 100% a year and doing it very efficiently,
Yeah.
and that's the
Yeah,
right way for us.
that's my question, because I mean, you already said that you're in the beginning there was of course an ego about number of people, and that is completely changed right now. So it sort of stops in 22, and it stays flat. So then when you start raising more money and you don't put it into people, there is likely another way how you want to get the leverage from that capital. And do you have any specific focus areas where you strategically invested?
Yeah, so I'd say we continue to invest in the R&D side of the
Yeah,
company. And then obviously, we do have a go-to-market sales and marketing investment, but we've just done it much more gradually as the revenue of the company grew so that we weren't burning as much money. So it's
yeah,
just a shift. I think there were times had we spent more money, it would have just been pure waste. Like literally, it would have been dollars out the door for no purpose. Like the example I give is one of our competitors I saw for a while was spending $2 million on Google SEM per month. And we were playing around with Google SEM, spending, ten, $15,000 a month, saw zero, nothing coming from it. So that was money that they were spending that had literally zero benefit.
yeah,
And so like you can sometimes just make bigger mistakes when you have too much money. On the other hand, money can sometimes accelerate your ability to go and do things where perhaps you're not, you don't worry as much about fixing margin or you don't worry as much about making a hire. And so, yeah, it's you finding that right balance where you don't want to be wasteful, but you don't want to allow bad decisions to happen because you're worried about money. And so I think
Yeah.
you got to find the right balance.
But yeah, what I hear is you got almost like a bootstrap mentality because bootstrap type companies say, okay, we don't need that money because we spend it in a responsible way.
Yeah, we're not that far. Like the true bootstrap, we would have been much more, even way more efficient. I like the place where we are, where we have money in the bank. We're not
Yeah,
cash limited. We can make decisions where we lose money and not be stressed about it. And that's a good place to be. Like when you're
yeah,
truly
exactly.
bootstrapped and you go, oh, I can't lose money this week. I can't make that decision. Like I don't like that feeling.
That is true, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, have you ever considered in the last 2, 3 years to not only do a build strategy, but also maybe a buy strategy, acquiring companies?
Yeah, we've looked at it. Largely in our space, buy means acqui-hire. There's not many interesting people to buy that would have a product that we want that we think is better than ours, or
Hmm.
some of them might have some customers. That's sometimes what you're buying. What's interesting is that there's so much VC money in the space that by and large, anybody with a half-baked idea can go get more venture capital. So very hard to convince the person to go be acquired when they can just go raise more money.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's a bit of a catch-22. Like, like I said, we have certainly looked at acquire opportunities, but we've not gone and done anything inorganic. There's an argument that over time there will be more consolidation in this space, and some of the bigger players, there's 4 or 5 bigger players, may merge and may ultimately, go to market together. I'm not seeing it yet, but certainly there's an argument that over time that'll happen.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm currently the reason I'm asking. I'm currently writing a long form essay on merger and acquisition challenges, and I mean this typically also describing my own experiences there. And there's so many different experiences, but what you say there is very true. The moment you're on the edge, there's hardly anything to acquire. So it's
Yeah.
um, yeah, and that of course yeah that makes it a totally different ballgame. Then you have to yeah run the train yourself. If you just peel back over the last 3.5 years since we talked, what is the toughest decision that you had to make in that time frame?
I mean, I'd say certainly like I made plenty of mistakes with hiring decisions and organization decisions, which ultimately created tough decisions for me, but that were of my own making. And I'd say if you went and asked those people, they'd say that they didn't like the outcome and they were angry with me. And they have every right to be because, where I made mistakes and I later had to, you know, move people on, that was entirely my fault, right? They didn't do anything wrong. They didn't, go into it trying to create a bad situation.
Yeah.
So I'd say, the biggest mistakes or hard decisions around hiring. I'd say
Okay.
the other hard decisions over time have been around, prioritization, especially in a world where, you have existing customers on an existing product. How much do you support those products versus new? And we're relatively small when it comes to, this in the scheme of things. When I go look at OpenAI, one of the things I'm most impressed by as a company is their ability to completely stop and cut projects um, that are not meeting their criteria. So they just did this with their video generation models, where
True.
it was doing something, and it's probably pretty in relative terms pretty big business, but it wasn't doing enough and what they wanted, and so they completely just stopped Sora, or they have some models that they're just no longer going to support. Some of the 4.0 models they're just going to stop supporting entirely, even though a lot of people are using them and having good success with them. That's hard. Like, and it's
Exactly.
so impressive that at the scale they're operating at, they're willing to do that. And so it gives pause or gives I don't know what you want to say, like, hope for smaller companies that should make similar decisions. Like you should be willing to say no to customers and lose that business in order to prioritize and focus on the right things.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know exactly what it is because you leave behind the whole range of customers, not even on legacy software, but it's actually quite, it's on the edge software as well. Has it got to do with size then? Or is it just yeah, just a way of running the business.
Yeah, I mean, it's a way, they're very good at running it. Now, you could say, oh, they're so big, it doesn't matter. Well,
Yeah,
yeah, but they're so big, that's real revenue. The things that they're cutting are bigger than most businesses today. And they're just saying, stop, no, we don't want this anymore.
yeah.
That's hard.
And what can we learn from that then? Because they have criteria. It needs to bring a certain, yeah, it needs to bring the leverage at the end. And if it doesn't meet that criteria, then it's end of life.
Yeah, I mean, and Google did this for years, where Google went and looked at all the search traffic and started building businesses to basically handle certain of the high intent search traffic. And they had a criteria. It had to get to certain billions of dollars in certain time period and certain profitability. And
Yeah,
most of those businesses they shut down. But for instance, Google Flights still exists because that ended up being sort of a, good place to operate. So I think you'll see the same with OpenAI, where they'll try a lot of things and shut most of them down,
yeah.
but they are so extreme in their willingness to shut things down that it's impressive.
It is exactly. Yeah, it's frightening sometimes always. Because that is the thing, you cut it, so it's not there anymore, and then you need to have something else to make up for it. Because it's also public, the public is watching. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so yeah, when we started about what changed over the last 3.5 years, you mentioned all the things that were positively going on you. You also said something, okay, there's also a couple of negatives. Any
Yeah. I generally think it's a positive. So I think like the ability to have fewer people means less communication tax, means more responsibilities, more opportunities for people. There's a perceived negative, which I've noticed, which is people go, I was told I should be a manager, or I was told by now I should be, managing X number of people, or in order for the next thing in my career, you need to give me more responsibility. And on one side, like I understand, I get it. Like bigger companies of yore had more people, and if you were, if you wanted to make more money, you had to go up. But the reality is that that's not true anymore. Like individual contributors can make a lot of money, and in my opinion, like the most fun is actually a small company that has the most change. The relative to the size of company versus the size of change. So if you have a big company that makes a lot of change, that's not as much fun as a small company that makes a lot of change. And worst is a big company that makes very little change. That's no fun at all. So
exactly.
but I think the consequence is we get into these hard conversations where people go, I want to go do something else, or, why are you not giving me enough opportunity? And what I wish I could do is, and I try, and I've not done a good enough job of this, is help people understand that it's about expanding the reach that you have, and you don't need people working for you, especially now where you can have agents working for you and you can manage agents. You don't need people working for you in order to have more impact on the company. And so instead of
Yeah,
saying, okay, I need to go somewhere else, how do you automate more of the simple things that so you don't need to do those? And how do you start managing more AI agents and taking off, on bigger and bigger problems? So instead of saying, okay, here, person X, I'm going to give you this sliver of this problem, what if I could go to you and say, here's the real picture, go handle that. Well, one, if you solve the real thing, I can pay you more money because
oh
that's a
yeah,
bigger, meatier thing. And I don't need to hire four people to do it. And two, well, if you can solve that, that requires a lot of skills and complex thinking, and I think can be very interesting. So I guess I've
it
been a
is.
bit disappointed on that. Where I see what most people want to do is they want to stay working on slivers and just be paid more for different slivers and be paid a lot for a sliver that they see as more expensive. What I'd rather them do is I'd rather them take on bigger problems and get paid more for bigger problems. But
Exactly.
it's what's very hard is it's hard for us to pay people more when they're just working on a different sliver and it's
Yeah,
not having a bigger impact on the company. Now,
exactly.
in the end, I point fingers at myself, right? It's my job to set that expectation with the people and create a framework under which they can get paid more, move up in their career and learn new things and automate the simple things. And if there's a failure, it's on me to not having done that. So I don't look at it and go, it's that person's fault. By no means. When they go and try to find a new job, I look at it and I say, that was my fault. I didn't create the world in which they could succeed here.
Hmm. Yeah, it's very recognizable. from my own past as well. Not that I've ever admired to have a large team, but it's the thinking, right? And this is now accelerated by all the technology that's out there, and people yeah, haven't caught up to that. They still think that being a manager and having a team of 15 people is something they can be proud of. Where at the end, it's all
Yeah.
about, the impact for the company.
Yeah, I'd say more people are starting to understand that
Sure.
smaller teams can have an impact. I think where this rubber meets the road today is they don't want to do the same thing. And I agree with them. I don't want them to do the same thing, but as a consequence, they need to, instead of just handing that thing they're doing off to a person so they can get the next role, they need to use AI to automate that thing. And that's a shift where it's like, okay, how do you clean your own kitchen so you can go make better food instead of hiring a dishwasher? That's a
Yeah.
shift.
I mean, this is actually what you said 3.5 years ago, that valuable people replace themselves. So it's a repeating topic and it will go on forever because it will always be the case. I mean, why would you keep yourself into a share because of the fact that you want to have that share? The best thing you can do as a person is to,
Yeah, to help them go. I mean, the conversation I hate having is when somebody goes, well, I don't want to do this work anymore. I want to do the next work.
yeah,
Okay, but instead of coming to me with that, why don't you solve it and say, I don't need to do this work anymore. In fact, no one needs to do this work anymore because I've solved it. I can now monitor that and do the next thing, so pay me more money. Great.
exactly.
That's the best conversation possible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Talking about negatives, um, often saying no is seen as okay, yeah, that's a negative, which of course can also be around. But people have a hard time saying no. If you look at the last 3.5 years, where did you say no um, to make sure that you didn't lose what makes Regal so valuable?
Yeah, I mean, every day we say no on the R&D side all the time to projects. I think what we try to stay true to in our side is what our customers actually need. There's lots of interesting technology that we choose not to explore because it's not actually what our customers need. So that's one area. I'd say also, we said no to a lot of, hiring where it was perceived as the right thing. Oh, just hire this next person. Just hire that.
Yeah,
Well, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to go use the money in a different way. We certainly said no to segments of customers like we were talking about that we
yeah,
didn't think were going to be the right ones to serve. And, personally, I probably should have said no to more projects and should have been more, I always think I could be more focused on it's the bane of being a founder, right? Is like, it always feels like you're not doing enough. No matter how much you're working, you feel like you're not doing enough. And rear view, you go, well, I worked on the wrong things. And I should have, if I, focused only in these things, it would have been better. And
that's
that's
why I'm
tough,
asking.
is knowing which things to focus on.
So what have you learned in the meantime to become better at that? Better saying no to the right things, the wrong things.
Yeah, I don't have the perfect advice for anybody. I
No?
mean, I just think it's the line that I use with people is that strategy is actually often a rear view mirror project. And people sort of go, what? Like, aren't strategies supposed to be forward thinking? And I go, yes, people think that strategy is sitting down and looking forward and knowing what to do. But the reality is that many of these companies, when you ask them what their strategy is, what they're looking at is they're going, oh, I see what's worked. Like, great. And now I understand. They're not actually looking forward and understanding. So if you accept that it's very hard to know the right thing to do in the future, you shift your mentality and you start trying as much possible to set yourself up for success, assuming you don't know the right answer. So how do
True.
you get enough data? How do you talk with customers to learn? How do you make decisions easier as much as possible? What
Yeah.
sorts of bets are you going to make and how many dollars are you going to put behind it before you go too far into making a big mistake?
Yeah.
What are easily reversible things where it's not such a big deal if you go do it versus not reversible things like signing a contract or hiring people or opening an office, be
Yeah.
much more cautious on the not reversible things. So I think,
You have a framework.
I think over time you develop rules of the road, and what we've
Yeah.
done internally is we've turned those into values, what we call values, and
Mm.
every new employee is taught about these values. And we joke like we should have a bracelet for people that say, what would Alex do, or what would Rebecca do? Rebecca's my co-founder,
Yeah. Yeah.
because we try to live those values ourselves, and they should help us make better decisions over time so that we can move in the right direction.
Yeah. So yeah, there is always things to it, and it's the learnings that make it easier. And I agree with you. Sometimes it is easier to look backwards and see what works, and then double down on that. But something needs to work, of course, first. The other thing around product strategy and the things that you say yes to for customers asking for it, especially in today's world where there's so many opportunities. Um, any particular ground rule that you have there to say yes or no to a particular investment or particular direction that the customer is pushing you into?
Yeah, we try to stick with generally like where we're trying to go to as a roadmap, and we're trying to understand the impact of building the features customers asking for, impact both on the customers and on sort of our revenue.
Yeah.
The rule of thumb tends to be about 10 to 20% of our roadmap are things that customers are asking for, and the other 80 to 90% customers are asking for outside of what we were thinking of doing already. And the other 80 and
Yeah.
90% are things we're doing. The more you're up market, I think the more you get pulled into customer requests, the more you're down market, the more you can push back on those because it doesn't matter as much.
Sure.
But the hardest, like I think when customers are good customers, which is an interesting concept, they want us to succeed. And when they come forward and they don't say, here's the feature I need. They say, here's the problem I have. How many other customers have the same problem? Those are great
Exactly.
customers.
Oh yeah, exactly. Because well, not a lot of them are asking for this.
Yeah, whereas the harder customers, they go, I don't care what other customers want. I need this exact feature and I need it tomorrow, no matter what, or I'm leaving. Well, that puts
Yeah.
us in that makes it hard for us as a company to succeed. So my school of thought is always this is a partnership. I want the customer to succeed and they should want us to succeed. So I
Yeah.
try not to do things which make it hard for them to succeed, and they should try to not do things that make it hard for us to succeed. Because in order to do what they want, we have to remove resources from something already scheduled, which may piss off people and make us do a worse job. Build something that only one person may use in a way that only may work for them. So
Yeah.
that may create a worse outcome for everybody. And I'm not saying I don't understand that there's important things for the customer. I get it. But in the end, I hope that it can be a partnership.
Exactly. And it all starts with the customer knowing their role, describing the problem, and then us understanding the problem and building the solution, and not the other way around.
Yeah.
Because that's what you see a lot. So I'm glad that your customers are actually sharing the problem with you. One last question before I wrap up. If you would be rebuilding Regal today, would there be anything you would do differently in terms of how you position it?
Yeah, I think the hardest thing I found to communicate is what I learned when running marketing, that how powerful it is to have information on the customer and to be able to personalize each interaction. That concept of personalization or segmentation is so prevalent in marketing now. But when we go to the contact center and even into the IT organizations, it's not how people think. It's not the first way people sort of imagine it. And so I wish I could find ways to explain to people why that is so important and focus on, finding ways to really improve the customer experience by using that technology. Because as an end user, that's what I dream of. I dream of the day that I go to my favorite brands and they know exactly who I am, exactly what I've purchased in the past, what my problems are, what's going on, and they're looking out for me. And
Yeah.
they don't treat me like everybody else. They go, okay, well, Alex, we answered your call immediately because it looks like you have an urgent issue.
Yeah.
Versus, this is just some email I sent with something that you can deal with in 4 weeks and it doesn't really matter. Where they think about how do they do work to make my life easier instead of me having, like right now, a lot of the time I have to go do a bunch of busy work in order to be able to then get the thing I want from a brand. So that's sort of still my dream. And I think for whatever reason, it's been hard to. There are some companies that really adopt that mindset and have been incredible partners in changing the way they interact with customers. But we've struggled in other cases to get people to understand the value of treating each customer like an individual,
Mhm.
because it does take work. It's not free, to
No.
go from a world where you say, okay, it's an assembly line, treat everyone the same, to no, we're going to have the data and the context and the journeys to make sure each person gets the right experience. That takes real work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's not getting easier, and at the end, the noise is getting louder and louder. I completely agree with you. But on the other end, you're in the market. You said you had 200 customers. So every year you add 20 or 30, you got a fantastic year. So it needs a different approach at the end because you don't need 5,000 leads. At scale, going to the market, personalize things. It really comes down to thoroughly understanding the problem that they're having and articulating it better than they could even do themselves. That is where the real value comes in, from what I see all the time. All right, last question then. Based on what you learned the last 3.5 years, we've talked about it a couple of times. What would be a do and what would be a don't that you'd like to share with people that aspire, a journey like you're doing yourself at the moment?
Yeah, look, I think a do is like, hopefully you're lucky enough that when you're talking with customers at an early company, one thing that you're talking about where they reach across the table, they grab you and they say, I need that now. Like, follow that, North Star, and, really focus on that. Don't, I'd say be very careful about hiring, especially in this day and age, don't solve problems with people, like solve the problem and then hire people if you want to. But I think that's a very big shift in how companies are run.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I think it's one that everybody needs to get used to. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast again, sharing parts of the journey of the last 3.5 years. Where can people go to find out more about Regal or to say hi to you?
So, if you're somebody with a contact center, please go to regal.ai and we'd love to chat with you. And you can always email me at hello@regal.ai.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Alex. And this wraps up my conversation with Alex Levin, co-founder and CEO at Regal AI. If you got value from this episode, please share it with other SaaS founders who need to hear this as well. And if you got 10 seconds, a quick rating or review on Apple Podcasts will help more people to find these conversations. Thank you for listening to the Remarkable SaaS podcast. If you want more insights like this, subscribe to my daily email, Espresso with Ton. It's a 2-minute shot of clarity for SaaS founders who want to create pull, not push. You can sign up, along with getting my book, at valueinspiration.com. See you in the next episode.